Recently, I saw some tweets about your project. There was a conference down in Africa, which I really wanted to get to, and I just could not make it work. But one of the big talking points, if not the biggest talking point, was gridless. That's what I felt like everyone was talking about, your company. So we normally like to interview in person. We couldn't get down to Nairobi. We can't get you here in Austin, so we're going to do this remotely. But I want to hear everything about gridless, what you're up to. Tell me all about this project.
Yeah, thanks. So at Gridless, what we really are about is, yes, we do Bitcoin mining, but we're about backstopping mini grid electricity providers. So really what you have in Africa is a lot of people who don't have electricity and grids that aren't well built. And so what they need is somebody who can come in and use that energy and help provide some sustainability to their own economic model. And then what we do at the same time is we provide some confidence to them that they can push out further to other locations and that they'll have a buyer of last resort.
I think for a lot of people, it's probably going to be a little bit to understand what life is like living in these communities in Africa, because most of us have just become very used to the fact that we live in a house with running water, electricity, sewage, all the kind of things that we've come to take for granted. Yet in some of these communities, they can't. So firstly, start with the cities in these African countries. All major cities, are they just like major cities anywhere else?
Yeah, so that's a big bucket, right? So you've got some major cities. Let's start with that. So if you're in Nairobi or Lagos or Cape Town or Cairo or just some of the big cities, it is a lot like anywhere else in the world, with some maybe some more extremes on both the rich and the poor side. And so you have and you don't have as good of infrastructure in those cities either. So yes, that is the case. Then. And even in the cities, so for the past 10 years before this, we were building internet connectivity infrastructure throughout both urban and rural, and you see that what you have in the low income areas is really nothing, and people are really struggling, and then you get a small sliver of middle class and even smaller sliver of upper class, and it's a numbers game, right? So you have something like only 40% of the people in the African continent can get connectivity to the internet. The other 60 can't. And even of those 40% who can get connectivity to the internet, this is even in the cities, right? Not just rural areas. They most of them can't afford it. So there's an affordability problem too. The same actually applies to electricity. So the numbers are similar. I think it's 37% or approximately who can get access to electricity. But even those who can get access aren't always able to afford it. And so you have this kind of doubling down problem. So access and affordability are closely linked for both internet and and power.
And when you talk about access to internet, does that include mobile access?
Yes, and so when I talk about internet connectivity, I mean all of the internet connectivity, and something like 95% of the internet connectivity in Kenya is mobile. So that is the majority of that internet connectivity is mobile. So we do have these islands of connectivity now. Kenya is particularly well blessed with it. We have companies who've done a good job over the past decade. Other countries are not nearly as far along. So if you go to Malawi, you're going to have a very, very different experience than if you were in Kenya. But even there, you have these islands of connectivity, but the prices are still high. So if you have somebody whose monthly, disposable income is, let's say, $5, you're going to be very careful how you spend every penny, every shilling, and so you have to make a choice between, am I going to pay school fees? Am I going to buy water or milk or bread, or am I going to pay for internet connectivity? And those are the kinds of decisions people are making every day.
So the expenses relative to what they earn, not so much relative to the rest of the world?
Yeah, that's true. So it's actually, we get amazingly cheap data prices if you compare it relative to where you're sitting today in Austin or even in London. We have really, really cheap internet, but it's relative to how much you make. And a lot of people don't have that same level of income. So I was, for years, you'd see me if I stood up on stage somewhere. I'd give some pithy statement about like you can't have a 21st century economy without power and connectivity, and that's true, right? Because if you think about it, if you're going to build any of the digital services we think about for government, or if you're going to have some type of ed tech play, or you're going to have information for the doctors and healthcare providers, or if you're going to run a business more efficiently, you need both power and connectivity, internet connectivity. And so, when we were looking at this space, it was like, wow, we've been so focused on internet connectivity for so many years, but power isn't there either. And so if we really hope to kind of push these things forward, you have to provide a base level, that foundation that everything else can be built on.
And it might seem like a simple question, but if you're able to bring power into these communities, what are the range of differences it makes? I mean, I would think of simple things like if it's a home, it would make it easier for the kids when they're doing the homework when it gets dark, like simple things like that. But you probably have got a better range of examples of the differences it can make.
Yeah. So, I have some land up country, and, we have friends who are the farmers who live around us. It's very agricultural. It's tea fields and, maize and just normal crops, very agricultural, dirt roads. And our neighbors don't have a power line to their house. They still use, they buy the very small solar panels that they can put on their house, and they'll charge a light with it all day, and then at night they'll have that. Or they use paraffin. And paraffin lamps are very dangerous, especially, for growing children. And so, you still have that all over Kenya. So what do you think it's like in other countries, right? It's that aren't as far along, aren't as middle class as Kenyans are. So there's a big problem across the continent about electricity and what it can do for you. So, at first when people get electricity, they do the things we just talked about, which is first, can I get a light bulb? The difference between being able to work from when the sun goes down, which it goes down like a rock at 6:30 to 7:00 every night, right? So when it goes dark, it's very dark. There's nothing else you can use besides fire. So if you can't use a paraffin lamp, then what are you going to do? You're going to do nothing. And so people go to bed and they wake up early, and it's agricultural and it works, but it's not good. And it's not kind of furthering the human condition. It's not making it a more level playing field. It's not, allowing people to get to the same level as other parts of the world. And electricity, energy is the thing that does that. As much as internet is important, if you don't have electricity, you don't have lights, then you don't really have anything. So if you start there, you say, well, what do people do? Well, first of all, they get lights. Second of all, they charge their phones, because everybody has a phone, and they'll buy a smartphone if they can afford it. They're relatively inexpensive now. The third thing they do is they will maybe, and this might be 3 to 5 years down the line, if they can get a mini grid power cable to their home, they might buy a refrigerator or a television, and then they start using more electricity. Other things that they do is, especially in the agricultural belts, is they're able to pump water now, and so then they can irrigate more and feed their crops with more water, as well as their animals. So it changes their lives significantly the more they have access to energy.
And does it do anything in terms of safety? Because you said it gets very dark very quick.
So depends. So you'll see in towns, so not villages, but more towns, you'll see in places like Kenya, you'll see them erect these really tall towers with big lights on them that then cover as much of the town as possible with overhead light. And so, yes, that does add security. In the villages, you need it a little less because everybody knows everybody. It's these villagers who've been, generations around each other. But does it add security? Absolutely. It does every time.
Yeah. Okay. And so currently, what are the power sources? How are they generating power across, major cities, smaller towns? What's the current energy mix?
Again, it depends on country. In East Africa, we're really blessed with renewable energy. So I think something like 90+% of the grid mix here is renewable energy. And that's hydro and geothermal. primarily. We've had some large solar being built as well, and we have a very large wind turbine plant up in the northern desert near Lake Turkana. In other countries, it differs. So Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, mostly East Africa has a ton of hydro. You go further south, you get more solar, and that makes a part of the mix. But they're still building, they're still burning a lot of fossil fuels for energy as well. It's needed. And quite frankly, I think it's fair to say that Africa should have the benefit of going through the same energy use curve that the rest of the world got to use.
Is there plenty of investment wanting to come in and support these communities?
So there's plenty of discussions and people trading words about it.
Right.
So, if you talk to the World Bank sorts and, the USAIDs and CEDAs and, UK type organizations, they're all talking about how much we need to build more energy in Africa. And they're right. I mean, they're absolutely right about that. There's been a huge amount of money committed to it, not a huge amount of movement on that money. It takes a long time to actually move that money out and put it to work. There's some interesting things that are happening. If you look at across a country, there is a grid. That grid might not be well built. It might be okay on its generation side. It might be poor. It might be good. But generally, the grid and the distribution of that energy is where things fall down. And what we're seeing is that you'll go into cities like Lagos and you'll get 30 plus power outages in a month. In Kenya, you get maybe 3 to 5, and that's just downtown Nairobi, right? But if you're on a mini grid, you might get 1 outage in a month. And so it's the ability for these energy distribution arms of the grid to be able to do it and do it well, and that's just it's difficult for them to do. We're not well connected on our grid, and therein lies the opportunity and the challenge.